Most people spend their entire lives believing they are moving toward freedom, when in reality, they are being trained for dependency. Not intentionally, not maliciously in some dramatic cinematic way, but structurally, quietly, systematically. Because the modern financial system was not designed primarily to create independent people. It was designed to create reliable participants. People who work consistently, spend consistently, borrow consistently, consume consistently. That's what keeps the machine operating. And the reason most people never notice this is because the system rewards short-term comfort while quietly delaying long-term freedom. That's the trap. Because if something feels normal long enough, people stop questioning it. Wake up. Go to work. Earn money. Spend money. Repeat. Generation after generation. And eventually, the routine becomes identity. People stop asking whether the structure itself makes sense. They only ask how to survive inside it more comfortably. Now let's go deeper. Think about how most people are taught about money growing up. Study hard. Get a good job. Work consistently. Buy a house. Save slowly. Retire someday. And again, none of those things are inherently wrong. But notice what's missing. Ownership. Leverage. Financial independence. System building. Very few people are taught how money actually compounds, how assets work, how leverage changes financial trajectory, how dependence creates fragility. Why? Because the system does not require widespread financial independence to function. It requires participation. Now here's where it becomes uncomfortable. Most people spend the majority of their life optimizing themselves to become better workers, without ever learning how to become owners. And workers and owners operate in completely different realities. Workers trade time for income. Owners build systems that continue producing beyond their direct effort. Workers depend on active participation. Owners build leverage. Workers stop earning when they stop working. Owners create structures that continue operating. That distinction changes everything. Now imagine two people starting at the exact same point in life. Same background, same income, same opportunities. The first person follows the default path completely. Every increase in income improves lifestyle. Every financial decision prioritizes comfort, appearance, and immediate satisfaction. Over time, obligations expand. Debt increases. Lifestyle hardens. And eventually, their entire existence depends on maintaining continuous income. Now the second person still participates in the system, but they think differently. Instead of consuming every increase in income, they redirect part of it toward ownership, assets, investments, skills, leverage. At first, their life does not look dramatically different. That's important, because the early stages of wealth building are visually unimpressive. And that's why most people quit. They don't see immediate external validation. But internally, something completely different is happening. One person is building dependency. The other is building escape velocity. And over time, the gap between those two realities becomes massive. Now here's something most people never realize. The system is incredibly effective at keeping people financially distracted. Constant advertising, constant comparison, constant upgrades, constant consumption pressure. Everywhere you look, someone is trying to convince you that happiness is one purchase away. A better car, a newer phone, a bigger house, a more luxurious experience. And because social validation is deeply psychological, people participate automatically. Not because they're irrational, but because humans naturally want progress, status, and belonging. The system understands that and monetizes it. Now think about debt. Debt is one of the most powerful control mechanisms in modern financial life. Not because debt is always evil, but because debt creates obligation, and obligation limits freedom. The moment large portions of your future income are already assigned, your flexibility shrinks, your risk tolerance shrinks, your options shrink. And once enough obligations accumulate, survival becomes the priority, not freedom. That's why so many people feel trapped despite earning decent incomes. Because income alone does not create independence. Structure does. Now let's talk about time. Time is the most valuable asset people have. Yet most spend nearly all of it earning money that disappears immediately. Think about how powerful that cycle is. You exchange your life energy for income, then exchange the income for temporary consumption, and repeat the process endlessly. Nothing accumulates. Nothing compounds meaningfully. Years pass this way, sometimes decades. And eventually people wake up wondering why they work so hard without feeling truly free. Now, here's where the system becomes psychologically powerful. It trains people to normalize exhaustion, to celebrate busyness, to wear stress like proof of importance. People become proud of how overworked they are, how little they sleep, how hard they grind. But constant exhaustion is not always evidence of progress. Sometimes it's evidence of misalignment. Because if effort is not building leverage, it only creates temporary survival. Now let's go even deeper. Most people are not poor because they lack intelligence. They're poor because they inherited patterns. Patterns from family, patterns from culture, patterns from society. Spend first. Finance everything. Prioritize appearances. Delay investing. Depend entirely on income. Those patterns become normal, and normal behaviors create predictable outcomes. This is why mindset matters so much. Because financial transformation begins psychologically before it appears financially. You have to stop seeing money as something that only supports your current lifestyle and start seeing it as a tool for constructing future freedom. That shift changes everything. Now, imagine someone beginning to think differently for the first time. Instead of asking, "What can I afford?" they ask, "What builds ownership?" Instead of asking, "How can I look successful?" they ask, "How can I reduce dependence?" Instead of optimizing for appearances, they optimize for leverage. That person starts moving differently, quietly, strategically. And over time, their entire life begins changing direction. Now, here's the most important part. Escaping the system does not necessarily mean quitting your job tomorrow. That's where people misunderstand this conversation. The goal is not reckless escape. The goal is gradual independence. Building enough structure, ownership, and leverage that your survival becomes less dependent on constant labor. That process takes time, but time passes either way. And this is where compounding becomes life-changing. Because compounding is not just mathematical, it's behavioral. Every intentional decision compounds. Every unnecessary obligation compounds. Every asset compounds. Every habit compounds. Every year of strategic thinking compounds. And eventually, compounding creates separation. One group spends decades increasing consumption. The other spends decades increasing ownership. At first, the difference looks small, but eventually the outcomes become impossible to compare. One group remains dependent on continuous effort forever. The other gradually creates optionality, flexibility, control, freedom. And freedom is the real goal. Not luxury, not status, not endless consumption. Freedom means your future becomes increasingly self-directed. Freedom means pressure decreases. Freedom means your life no longer collapses the moment income pauses temporarily. Freedom means having choices. And choices are what the system quietly reduces when people stay trapped in cycles of debt, consumption, and dependence. Now here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. The system will not save you financially. It will not automatically educate you financially. It will not prioritize your independence for you. You have to do that yourself. You have to think differently intentionally. You have to build differently intentionally. You have to question patterns intentionally. And that requires awareness. Because once someone becomes aware of the system, they stop operating unconsciously inside it. That's when real transformation begins. Gradually, quietly, but permanently. And if you're serious about building real freedom, real ownership, and real long-term leverage, step by step, like, comment, share, and subscribe to Smart Money Compounds, because this entire series is designed to help you think beyond the default system and start building a future that actually belongs to you. And comment below, what do you think keeps most people trapped financially? Debt, lifestyle inflation, or dependence on active income?